if this were going to be more of an actual metal, that I would raise this up a bit. But since I'm kind of just using the metal feature a little bit to just get some interesting results, but not be a true metal, I'm keeping the albedo down quite a bit to give me this. And then basically, sorry if I'm being redundant, I'm not quite sure where and everything that's happened. But if I turn off the that solid layer there, you can see there's some reflectance variation here just from the scan surface that I use, which looks good, but we can add some more to that by adding this fill layer. And then I just used a couple of maps here. I used the plastic roughness, and then I used the rusted painted metal, and just played with the range a little bit, and then used an add. And this gives me some little bit of albedo variation, and kind of look like just some scuff marks and dings and things like that, just to add a little bit of character and interest to the cockpit. So next, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the decal stripe. Like I showed in the video, it uses a position gradient to get the results, and that's really cool. A cool way to use something that it wasn't really designed. The mask component wasn't designed with things like that in mind per se, but just by tweaking a few settings, we were able to create this really cool stripe. And like I mentioned in the video, I could have just done this all by hand. I could have added a paint layer up here and painted this all down. But with a position gradient, first of all, I get a really nice crisp cutoff. There's no fall off. It's very straight and linear. I don't have to worry about any of my brush strokes being off. But the best part about it, and why I if I can, I always try to use procedurals, is that it's non-destructive. That's such a big deal, because you might get...
We have a question. Sorry for cutting you off. So
Sure.
One guy asked, where do you create material IDs? For those of you who haven't seen yesterday's video, you can create material IDs in your typical 3D software. So just open Maya, Blender, Max, you name it, and select a bunch of faces or sub-objects in your object, and apply to them any given material. Give it a random color just to kind of separate the different areas in your object essentially. And once you send that object to Marmoset Toolbag, then you'll be able to bake those colors as something called material ID essentially. I'm gonna link you the comment in the description.
Yeah, so I don't have the files on this computer. I'm on a different computer right now. But if I select this mask, material mask up here, if I hold down Q, actually, you know what? I can just go over here. It'll be easier, and select material ID. You can see all the colors here, and basically, in the high poly model that we use to bake down to the low poly, each of these elements were colored on the high poly model. So you would just assign a material to that particular element, and you would assign the material that you wanted it to, or a color that you wanted it to be, and then you would just assign that same color to other elements that you wanted to share that material with. So all the red, if you knew, okay, I want all the red panels to be the same type of material, all the yellow panels to be the same type of material, you just add that, and when you bake it down, it gives you a material ID mask, which is, if you go in the video, it's kind of at the very beginning, this base layer, you just add it right here, and then that's how Mixer is going to be able to quickly mask off those sections.
So I think one guy asked a really good question actually here for those who haven't seen the video. How do you even import an object inside Mixer? So I guess we can show them that whole setup workflow where you import a 3D object in Mixer.
Sure.
Yeah, no
we
need
can
to
come back to that in a second.
I guess no need to reopen the object, but just like show the menu or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you go to the setup tab, you have type here. It might default to like plain, which is something we'll get into in a minute, but that's for the surface. If you're creating a tileable surface, I think it might default to that. Then you have 3D asset, and 3D asset is actually where if you click on it, it's going to open the library, and then you can choose from Megascans 3D assets, and that's Again, something we're going to cover in a minute, but that's an extremely powerful feature. And then you have custom mesh, and custom mesh is where you would bring in your own assets. So if you've made your own low poly model, you've baked out the texture maps that you need, you would hit this, and it's just going to pop up a regular open dialog where you can browse to your model. I think it's OBJ or FBX, and then you would just click on that, and it will import that model, and then you can just from there go to the base layer, and then you would fill in your normal map, your occlusion map, curvature, material ID. If you had a need to have an albedo, metalness, roughness, those are there as well. But since we're starting with nothing on this one, we just had the basic baked out maps. So it's super simple to bring a mesh in for sure. So if you're good, we'll go ahead and continue a little bit. I think I was talking about the just the value of using procedural, the value of using the procedural masking for texturing, because you might have your lead or somebody come up and say, hey, I wouldn't mind that if there were maybe a little bit more of that yellow was showing instead of the blue. There's too much blue or something. Instead of having to go ahead and hand paint that stuff again and kind of going around all these little curves and the different angles and making sure that I'm getting like perfectly straight lines and that there's no little hiccups, I can just go up here and then hold down shift to move both of these sliders at the same time, and then I can actually adjust that. So maybe I make it a little bit more of an even distribution between the yellow and blue. It's obviously we had it a little bit up here because that's what we wanted, but being able to quickly and being able to quickly adjust these things is super important for production, because something that could take me 2 seconds to make an adjustment on because I'm just changing a slider is much more efficient than having to paint something out and then hear like, oh well, actually I kind of liked it better the other way. Just being able to quickly make these changes is a huge help. And then on top of that, if you're not even 100% sure what you want to do, sometimes just playing with these sliders and adjustments, all of a sudden you'll get a really cool result as you're going through different seeds or playing with the range, and you're like, oh wow, that actually looks really cool. I'm going to keep that instead. And I think that just there's a lot of value with using non-destructive techniques when it comes to texturing. So we will get into painting using a paint layer a little bit, but so it's very possible you can totally paint if that's what you want to do. But for me, if I can do it in a procedural, non-destructive way, I'm always going to kind of default to that method if I can. So let's see, let's scroll up a little bit. And then the universal grunge, I go over this a little bit again. I think I kind of had it sped up a little bit until we got to the sand and dirt. But the grunge stuff, like it really just ties everything together. I think even without it, it's still feeling pretty cohesive. But when you add that kind of stuff, it just starts to really connect the different surfaces and feel like that they've been going through the same type of environments as each of the other parts. So like with the dirt stuff, I thought was a really cool way to use the normal component, mask component, and it just really helps add a layer of realism. And when this thing is flying low to the ground, it's going to be kicking up dirt and dust and debris, and that's all going to be just smacking off the bottom of this paint here. So we wouldn't necessarily want a lot of it up top. And so by using the normal feature, it allows us to just be able to say, hey, directionality is going to be only coming from below, and we can change that. We can obviously change that based on what kind of subject matter we're working with and how we want that dust to have accumulated. In this case, I had it down below, but that's a really powerful way to use this, and is to just be able to.
Go ahead.
No, you're good.
And I think what's really important to highlight here is that, with mixers, kind of nature and its synergy around the Megascans library, you can actually have really photorealistic effects, like here for instance, dust underneath the spaceship, and actually use scan data, and it just gives it that extra level of realism that you can't get if you were to use, say, just random noises in the component mask stack. And that's really what I think is super powerful here, is that, and you can also obviously mask out the kind of scans with procedural layers to create infinite variations and so on, but having that combination just makes it, you know, super powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, you know, since we've implemented some of these new features, like being able to reference other maps, that has really gone a long way to just um, add complete believability and realism through and get rid of the procedural look. But yeah, I'll still use like a noise, perhaps on top, and then multiply it, and then I can play with the amplitude and frequency and things like that. So that way I can get a little bit of a random fall off, and you know, where is this stuff building up? Not exactly the best example in this case, because I do want the dirt to kind of be more uniformly present on the bottom half, which we're taking care of through the normal component. But yeah, like I will pretty frequently use noise to just kind of procedurally remove if things are feeling a little heavy-handed. So, but yeah, like the way that we can use maps, and like I also mentioned in the video, like we don't even have to just use something that's already loaded. We can go to the library and we can add something specific to the that perhaps wasn't in already loaded. And so I could add any of these types of things to the map instead of just using the sand one that I use. But since I already had that loaded and it worked perfectly in this case, that's what I used. But we have that flexibility to just be able to choose something else. And the great thing is, if you're hooked up with using this with Unreal, then you have access to all the Megascans assets. So you might find, oh, I don't have something that's working here. You could just go into the library, find something that looks good, click on it and download it, and then you have that asset ready to use in here. So it's a really great setup, and like I said, it's all non-destructive, so we can constantly tweak and change that, and never have to worry about like completely redoing a ton of work just because somebody wants to change.
So we have a question over here, and it's about humans, essentially. Someone wants to see photorealistic human mesh tutorials, essentially. And to answer that question, so right now Mixer 2020 is really in its first iteration, you could say, and once we implement features like subsurface scattering, for instance, then it'll make much more sense to have fully fledged tutorials that show you everything about character creation, essentially. And I'm hoping we can do that at some point. But as soon as subsurface scattering is available and it's in the works, we're gonna get back to that.
Cool. So there's been a couple comments about painting, and so I'm going to go ahead and open up a new file. I will use this surface forest floor here. Right off the bat, I just want to remind people that just because we added 3D, and that's been, it's obviously the big focus of this release, because it's a very significant feature that we've added. It doesn't mean that we've forgotten about surfaces and tiling materials. That's where Mixer started, and it's definitely something that we are focusing on still to make sure that it is as great as the 3D feature. So this is just a quick reminder of how powerful this is. So we have 3 surfaces here, and this base one that I added, it's a little monochromatic for my taste, so I just wanted to add this mossy ground here, and it adds a little bit of nice green and coloration. And then I add this grassy forest floor here. Oh, I can turn on displacement, yes, and you can see that stuff's really popping up, and adds a lot of depth just by adding that material. These three, I didn't use any of the mask stacks just because the blend options that I have on the base blend options, they work exactly how I wanted them to. I was able to just tweak a few values, and I was able to get this feeling like it was pretty much a unique scan, as if somebody had just found this patch of forest floor somewhere and scanned it, because all three materials that I grabbed are accurately scanned. I can just blend them together quickly, and I have a completely unique tileable material. So that is something that I just wanted to make sure that for people that are new to Mixer, or whether you've been using it for a while, we definitely are still very committed to making sure that your experience with making tileable surfaces is still as great as it was. And all of the mask components, all that stuff works the exact same way. You'll have all the same options, and you'll be able to utilize that the same way that we've been showing in the 3D. So it's a super powerful tiling material software, as well as 3D Painter. So one of the things that, like I said, has come up a couple times is painting. And so I just was quickly going to show some of that. If I activate this liquid layer here, it's basically just a little puddle layer that you can add here. And I have it sitting just below this surface in terms of the threshold. And then if I go into the paint here, you can see I have a lot of brushes here as a default, and then you can always go and add more brushes through Bridge, or even just by going to the online tab and searching for them. It's like I said, if you're part of the using your Unreal, you have access to these brushes, and from the Megascans library, and I believe, like Adnan said, we'll be adding some more as well. But if you scroll down to the colors here, I'm just going to disable the albedo, metalness, and roughness. But again, this is all these options here are here for you to paint. So when you are painting on one of these paint layers, you can add these, and you can paint pretty much like you would if it were any other painting program. So in this case, I'm just going to have displacement because I'm just trying to push this down a little bit. And as I start to click and hold, you'll see that we're getting some puddles coming in here. And that's, that lets you remove the procedural masking component, and lets you have a lot more creative control over this, and very specific locations. And so we can paint another happy little puddle over here. And so the nice thing is that it's a really great hybrid and blend of being able to just paint things yourself, or to utilize the procedural elements that we have in place. And so yes, you can paint you can paint a couple different ways. You can do it just with a paint layer, and be able to just add in these colors, or you could even add in, say, a solid layer, and then you could just make all the adjustments that you want, and then you could just mask it. And you can use a paint mask here, and then you could reveal or take away through your painting that way, and then you have complete control over where those masks are. So that's just I think that's a pretty good blend, because there are times where I can do something procedurally, but it'll take a little bit of time to get there. That's just kind of the nature of the beast. And if I'm certain that I'm like, well, that's not going to change, that's something I want, a detail that I want, then I could just mask it out by hand, or I could just paint it by hand, and I don't have to kind of switch between modes or anything. It's very, very fluid process where I can just quickly go between procedural and hand painting, which is something I really, really enjoy about Mixer. So we can also tile. Open up a new file here. We can kind of use some of the processes for just repurposing a Megascan asset by tiling some materials on top of an old one. So like, if I turn this overcast here, we have this log pile here, and I just quickly added a snow texture over it. And for this one, I actually I I got rid of the underlying detail, or wrap to underlying, so that basically I just was using the geometry, but most of the normal detail is pretty much just from the surface that I added. And then in the mask, I use that normal component, and then all of a sudden I have some snow kind of building up on these this log pile here. And then I add a little bit of a blur and then a gradient remap, and just like that, just real quick, all of a sudden I've got that kind of world normal positional directional snow being added to this, which will let me quickly repurpose this this cool log pile. And then I added, this is just a layer I added with very little, there's no mask. And as you can see, it just kind of adds some kind of little sprays of snow just to add a little bit more realism. And then I did another one where it's I wanted to have the ground be a little bit chunkier and make it feel like that maybe some animals or people were walking around. And so I added that, and then all I used was a positional gradient to mask out everything on the logs, and then just keep it to the ground. So that way it's not feeling like it's completely undisturbed snow. And it feels like it, animals and things have been disturbing the snow around that area. So it's just a quick and practical way that we can utilize the scan surfaces and put them on top of other 3D meshes and be able to kind of repurpose that. So and that actually it kind of segues into the next one. I don't know if Adnan, if there's any questions that you want to
There are so many questions, it's hard to keep up.
I apologize that I just go one to the next. So
no, I mean, so far it's great. So I'm just gonna address some of the questions over here. One guy asked if we had, if Mixer could do normal painting kind of workflows. And the answer is that is absolutely. So just create a paint layer, and then, if you don't want to have your albedo, just disable the albedo or hide it or set its opacity to 0. Like, you can do it multiple ways, and just leave the normal component and increase the displacement to change the intensity of your normal map. Obviously it's gonna, you're gonna have not only normal and displacement getting painted, but you can just, disable again the displacement, and now you have the normal. Same thing with importing decals. You can import as many decals as you want, and you can just stamp them all over, and they're gonna use height data and normal data essentially. So that's there. One guy asked, this was early on, help me find a job in game dev. So I guess this is more like, how do you find the job? We'll get to that question at the end of the live stream, because I wanted to talk about that a little bit. And next was Izzy. Could you provide ability to disable cast shadows? So I think if you go into, was it setup or performance? I can't quite remember, but in one of those tabs you can disable shadows, and you can disable all sorts of other settings as well.
I apologize for the construction going on upstairs.
Yep.
And I'm not sure what's going on with this. I had it open right before the live stream, of course, and now it's having some trouble opening. I'm on a pretty old computer, so I apologize about this. Let me try to open this again.
So another guy asked, I'm assuming you can paint directly on the model. So far I'm only seeing texturing and masking with layers. Absolutely, yes, you can. And one thing to note is that in the spaceship tutorial we showed you guys how to apply a decal, stamp it on the model, but you can literally just paint over the geometry. So it's the same workflow. Just create a paint layer and start painting. Pick up your brush, change the opacity, the jittering, and some of the settings, and then you're done. And yeah, someone said the noise that's coming from your computer is a whale. Right, go ahead.
So I don't know what happened there. That was really strange. Like I said, I'm on a pretty old PC at my office right now, and of course they're doing some construction overhead. So perfect time for a live stream. But so one of the important things, and it was really one of the major inspirations for the 3D aspect for Mixer was with the scan data. You know, it looks fantastic, but it's locking you to use something that's, you know, maybe not in the exact kind of biome that you're looking for. So this rock, for example, here, it looks great, but you know, what if your scene is not calling for this kind of like gray, more slate looking material and style of rock? So we can quickly change that. I'm just going to change this value a little bit, and then I'm going to activate this, and then all of a sudden we've got ourselves a completely different rock from before, and you know, it's less than, you know, 10 or so layers, and we have this nice, you know, sandy ground here, and it's kind of building up on the smaller rocks. We have more of that red rock erosion type of feel to it, and you're able to quickly change the look and feel of the rock, or whatever asset it is, to fit more of the theme of your environment that you're creating. So that's, you know, that's one of the driving forces behind adding a 3D texturing feature to Mixer, which is you know, very, very powerful. But beyond that, we can go even further, and we can change styles. And so just by loading up a scanned asset, we can start adding layers, and I believe that every layer here is pretty much, yeah, it's all solid fill layers. So there's no scan data that's happening here, but we're using the base mesh as a launching point. And so as I activate these layers, like this one in particular, is it's going to be softening the normal map. So if I go to the normal tab and I turn this off, you might not be able to see it very well on the stream, but it's kind of softening that normal. And then if I click on this base detail here, it's doing it even further. And so what it's doing is, by having these things set up, I'm basically, you can see that it's removing the kind of high frequency micro detail between the edge points, but it's still keeping that edge detail there. And so we're retaining the big shapes of this rock here, but it's getting rid of the higher frequency detail, which is going to help with the stylized look of this. And so we add some extra detail on top of that, just a little bit of this red dust here that just gives a little bit more character. And this was just done with a curvature, and then a posterized filter on top of that, and then the blur, and there's kind of lowered opacity just to help soften the effects of each of those, and then a clamp. And so the next one would be, I'm going to go into albedo here, because with things like this is kind of more of how you're going to be viewing this stuff anyways. The bright stone here, it's just kind of helping define further the shapes, and it's also just getting it ready for some more color adjustment, which we do up here, and then, you know, we'll lower that down back to kind of a gray. And then we have this crevice darken here, and this is just using a couple of curvatures together. This one uses the bottom one. If I hit 0, I should be able to look at just the active mask, which is really handy. But the curvature here is just it's using the default curvature, underlying mix, and all that stuff. Actually, this one is too. Never mind that. One of the layers here was he was using just the mesh. I think I actually know which one that is, so we'll get to that in a minute. But that adds these nice, strong, dark crevices in the rock. And again, that's just using this curvature as a base, and then adding on another curvature on top of that. And so then right away, that's, you know, it's kind of like your base rock right there. And that was just, you know, what, 5 or 6 layers. So you have a pretty good foundation to work from right away. And then up here, we have, I'll turn this on. It's just kind of like a base color for the grass. And I believe this is just, yeah, it's using a bit of a normal. Yeah, got a normal and the position gradient. And this is subtracting from the normal and then clamp and normalize. Let's see. Yep, the curvature, just kind of fine tuning some of those details there, and then a light bevel. And so that basically just kind of like gives us the foundation to work with for the grass. And then we added a crevice dust here, and that kind of going over some of those darker crack spots that we had earlier from this guy right here. Sun bleaching, just kind of giving a little bit more directionality and visual interest. Turn that on and off, and it's just literally using a normal and a posterize, and so we could tweak that a little bit and change the direction that that's coming from, and play with the range a little bit if we wanted. But it's again, it's just, these are lots of small steps to take, but it's, you know, those little small steps that turn it from just a photorealistic asset to that really nice stylized look that a lot of projects are gonna want. And so we can then add the edge highlight. Go ahead.
We have a bunch of questions and quite a bunch of funny jokes as well. People are saying that the noise was actually Chewbacca, and now there's a bunch of requests to texture Chewbacca with the fur and everything once there's subsurface scattering and opacity support. So
you guys caught me. I'm live streaming from the Millennium Falcon, so.
So opacity support is definitely planned. That's something that, you know, we've wanted to add for a long time. So you can expect that in the 2020 release series as well. And I wanted to address a few questions over here. One of them was, in the future, can we use a node-based creation, I guess, system to create some powerful textures? For Mixer, there's no plan to have it node-based, and as someone who really likes node-based workflows, like really likes them, I don't think that's a bad thing, to be honest, because Mixer is really centered around simplicity. And if you've ever tried pretty much any node-based software out there, it always gets super complex and weird the moment you start having maybe, you know, over 15 nodes. But if you go to 50 nodes, then it becomes mission impossible. And this is the thing, you know, when we introduced Mixer in 2016, there was no solution out there that allowed you to create photorealistic textures just by blending 2-3 layers just like that. Like, that was unseen up to that point. Before, you had to either do it in Suite or through node-based tools. But with Mixer, that workflow literally became so easy that it's you know, it's a given. You want to create a nice you know, muddy surface with leaves and water, whatever, just 3 layers, done. And that's really the magic of the software. Now, another question was, why should people choose this software over other softwares? That is a really good question. So one thing to keep in mind is that Mixer is part of the Megascans and now the Epic ecosystem, and we'll be integrating Mixer more and more with Megascans. You know, 3D support is better integration with Megascans, for instance, and that'll improve a lot more over the next couple of months. But we're also hoping to give you, you know, much faster live links, where instead of having to go from, you know, right now to send an object from Mixer to Unreal, you have to go to File, Export to Library, do a bunch of setups, and then go to Bridge, and then hit Export, and then you go to Unreal. So at some point in the future, we hope to make that a one-button operation, where you just go to File, send to Unreal, for instance, and there you have it done. And there are many things that we can simplify over there. But most importantly, I think there is no software out there, and I really believe this, that allows you to texture as fast as Mixer. Like, not even close. And with 3D support, essentially, you know, before, in the past, one stigma, you could say, that came around photogrammetry was that, oh, I downloaded this nice rock from Iceland. Okay, now I can only make Icelandic environments. But with 3D support, that's not the case anymore. you have like any asset, as you can see here, can be transformed into something photorealistic and super stylized. Like you can change it to any given biome. Someone gives you something from Iceland, change it to a rock in Africa or a rock in Zelda or Fortnite. So that's what makes Mixer special. It allows you to do all of that, and it's focused around it. So it's just faster than any tool out there to do that.
Absolutely. It's it's very fast and responsive, but it's also, like I mentioned before, it's letting me choose between whether I'm going to use something in um, more of a procedural manner or paint it myself, and to be able to right there on the layer create that procedural mask stack and be able to make those adjustments right here in 3D, and then be able to paint on top of that. It's just a really good blend between those two methods. And then let's say that I wanted to do a different kind of texture, maybe something that's still photorealistic for this rock, but I couldn't find a Megascan surface that was kind of fitting what I wanted. Well, then I could create my own Megascan surface, and be able to use that on top of this. Um, I can take 2 or 3 or 4 Megascans. I can use some great masking techniques and things like that. Create the rock that I want as a tileable surface, and then apply it to this mesh. And that's just where, and it's all it's just packaged into this one application, which means that I'm going to be able to do that even faster than before. So
Yeah. So two last
it
thing
to
to
me it's just
cover.
really.
So first of all, there's one question that I just wanted to go over quickly. Philip Park asked, is there like a general limit for how dense a mesh should be to import it? So that really depends on your graphic cards in general. But we're actively working on making sure that you can import really high density objects from the Megascans library or your own to Mixer and not have performance issues. There's also a lot of questions about baking. Yes, baking is in the works, just so you won't have to go to, say, Marmoset Toolbag, but bake directly within Mixer. That is in the works. And just to kind of close on the whole, should you use the software? I think once Josh shows you all the different layers and we see the end result of this rock, you're really gonna go wow, because I was shocked when I saw that, okay, we just took something from Iceland, like literally took pictures of it and changed it into an object that could go into Zelda or Fortnite. It's really great. So yeah, let's get going, Josh.
Yeah. Um, so I think about the time the question came over, I was activating the edge highlights, and this is just a simple curvature and remap here. And if I go back into this, you can kind of see the effect that we're just getting a little bit more highlights and color on these edges here. So the grass is, it's looks super great when these we start activating these layers. This is just a gradient color, and it's just kind of giving a little bit more of a tint to this to the grassy area here. The grass highlights, it's just, again, kind of using some curvature and some other layers, mask layers, to just bring out some highlights to the raised sections of the underlying geo. And so that just adds a nice little bit of noise and a little bit of value breakup along the grass, which is really helping drive with that kind of stylized look. And then ground dirt, this is just kind of like a little bit towards the edges here. We'll see some nice darker tones, and just kind of feels like it's almost like a can't even think of the term, but yeah, it's just helping soften towards the edges. And then grass color adjustment, again, it's kind of the same as what we saw down here. It's just literally letting us have a little bit more ease of control over the way the color of the grass looks. And then the grass blades, we'll be going over this, and I believe Adnan said, you said we'll be going over this a little bit more detailed in the future. So I'm not going to go over too much about that. But it's a simple way to use the scattering techniques. We just start with a single circle, and we space it up to 80, which kind of squishes it down into this oval. And then we have the scatter control here, and then we're just scattering that around. So right now it's just set to 200, but if I, not 5,000, if I crank it up to 500, we'll see that we have, we'll see that we have a few extra ones kind of lying around. And so, and all three of these were set up the same way. It's basically just a slight value change so that we get a little bit of variation in the grass blades. And this is just a really cool way to add a little bit of visual detail while keeping that painterly style that we have going on with the rest of the material. And then we just have a projection on top of this as well, which the projection is just letting us tile it or changing it to so that the tile is multiple times or that it maybe tiles fewer times. And then we have a position gradient to make sure that it does not affect the rock. So that's how those were made. And then the flower was pretty similar. The flower petals, if you click on the mask, we have just a circle, and then we use the circular transform, which is basically kind of like a radial array. And so as I change the repetitions, you'll see that I start to actually get more petals in there. So that's basically, we take that circle and it's just going to kind of do a radial array, and it gives us this petal look. And then we have a swirl where we can actually kind of give it a little bit of a twist. So, and then we just use the same techniques as the grass. We scatter them, use a projection to kind of scale them to the right amount, and then a position gradient to make sure that they're not applied to the rocks. And then it was the same thing with the flower head. It was just probably, if I had to guess, it was just kind of copy and paste this because it's virtually the same thing, except we just changed the settings on the circle so that the spacing was set up to 80, and then we have these little yellow flower heads right in the middle. So very, very simple process, and it lets you go kind of as crazy as you want. You can just by running a couple of masks on some solid fill layers, you could have a pretty good stylized rock real quick, but then you have the ability to really get down to the nitty-gritty details and start adding details that still feel stylized and fit within your project's art direction, but it's the detail amount is completely up to you. And that's what's really great about this, is that you have that control, and you can quickly get results by using these techniques, and then just duplicating layers even and then just changing some of the procedural values so that it gives you different results. So yeah, I think that's kind of what we were hoping to hit with this.
So I think what's really nice about this example, and the reason why we wanted to cover it at the end of the live stream, was just to show like one final asset that kind of showcases again like scanning objects and how the end result looks like. Can you go to the PBR view instead of albedo?
Sure.
Perfect. And I guess the one thing to note down here is that everything that we're showing you here, we're going to be producing more and more tutorials that teach you guys how to make this. If there is a sandstone desert rock that we scanned, we want you guys to know exactly what you can do to convert it to, I don't know, Zelda, any franchise that you want out there. And once you reach that point, Mixer will basically become this huge thing where you can take any software, any asset, and convert it to your liking. Maybe Quixel right now we don't have any rocks from a desert in China or from somewhere in Africa or Alaska or whatever. You can just pick some references from those biomes and start matching them within Mixer. So you could create I don't know, Alaska snowy rock smart materials, and import all the Icelandic rocks, and then just start applying your smart materials. And just like that, you'll have photorealistic assets that use photogrammetry, and so like top quality, and without having to go into ZBrush or whatever and manually sculpt every single detail and then bake and then paint and so on and so forth. Like everything is there essentially. So I'm just gonna see if we have any questions here. um, yes, I wanted to get back to the last question. The quote was, help me find a job in game dev. I am in despair. So I think one thing to note about the industry in general is that in the next couple of years, things like to be an artist is going to become much simpler than ever. And you won't have to spend 6 months or 1 year just to learn how to texture. We've already, we're working really, really hard on our tools, be it Mixer or Bridge, to make sure that you don't have to spend too much time learning how to use them, and everything becomes just a one click. With that said, I think it's really important that you balance things out, learn the fundamentals, learn how to do great lighting. Like the assets that we have in the library are all out there, and right now if I were to create a scene, it would never match the quality that someone like Victor M and Jack McKelvey, Josh Powers or James Lucas create. And that's simply because I'm not practicing that enough. And this is the really the one thing to remember here. If you don't spend enough time honing your lighting skills, your composition skills, and also scene optimization skills, then no matter how many assets you throw into a scene, it's always just gonna look like, oh, okay, he used Megascans assets. And that shouldn't be the case. If someone sees your scene, they should just go like, oh my god, this is stunning, how did he do that? And if you think about something like the Orgrimmar World of Warcraft scene that Victor did, this is pretty much the feeling that it gives you. Same thing with this rock. If we were to publish it, before this release even happened, and maybe I posted on Facebook, hey, stylized rock I created in ZBrush and Photoshop, everything is hand painted. Like there's no way for someone to know, this is scans, because again, it's like so much different from the initial result. And this is really important when you're starting. Don't just take assets, slap them everywhere and call it a day. Learn the fundamentals, learn how to change assets, and be patient. It took me about 5 years to even get the first job offer, and I got maybe, I can't even count how many job rejections that I got, sometimes because of visa, sometimes skills. Like getting into this industry is not that easy, depending on where you live. If you're in the US, it can be a little bit easy, but let's say you're in Africa or you're in China, you want to work at Naughty Dog. Like there are so many setups that make it super hard, and the only way to fight and win that battle is through patience and discipline. So be patient with how much time it's going to take, and be disciplined to practice enough during that time, essentially. Anything to add to that, Josh?
Yeah, I was gonna say, just kind of echoing that. I had a lead tell me once that it doesn't matter how amazing your material is, if you have bad lighting, your material will look bad. And there's a lot of truth to that. And so, like Adnan was saying, if you focusing on the fundamentals, lighting is super important. Composition is very important, especially for scenes. The assets, we're making strides to make them easier and quicker to make photorealistic, and that's the goal, is to be able to make the content faster and better looking, so that we can have more of it in a project, so that we can fill out the environments of a game really fast. And those are going to still be requiring artists to have their hands on that and all that, but having somebody be able to take those assets and assemble them in a scene that makes sense and that is going to draw your eye to right where you want it to go, and to be lit in a way that just feels like a stunning, epic environment, rather than just a kind of a flatly uninteresting lit environment, is super important. And I think that while there's always going to be a need for content creators, I think that there's definitely been it seems like there's been a bit of a shift in terms of how many content creators there are versus how many people can really truly assemble breathtaking environments with that content. And so being able to do that efficiently is a really great marketable skill. So if you're kind of more focused on being a content creator, that's great. But like Adnan said, have the fundamentals down, because not only will that make you more marketable as an artist trying to get into the industry, but it will really help you when you are making the content to know the kinds of things to look for. That, oh, if I do this, that the lighting might be a little bit trickier for the artist to work with. Might make him have to create some special lighting situations around this asset so that that responds correctly and things like that. So having that knowledge up front is definitely going to help you and benefit you in many ways.
Yeah. So just to kind of add a little bit more and close on this one, something to keep in mind here is that when you look at a company like Quixel, for instance, we have people literally everywhere. Like, I was originally from Africa and I didn't have a solid portfolio. I just made stuff that looked interesting for Quixel. I applied. They went, oh, he could probably apply this knowledge to this thing, and that's usually how it goes. If you want to go to Blizzard or Naughty Dog, create amazing environments that will make any senior artist or lead artist in that studio go, oh my god, we need that person. And once that's done, just keep iterating again and again and again until you get that call, or until you reach out for that call, essentially. So there's also a huge community around Quixel that is always available to help. And I really encourage you to go to our Discord. I'm just gonna post the link right here, right now. There you go. And there's also the Facebook community group. So these groups are full of amazing people like our beta testers, and they're there, just giving you feedback and also kind of moving on with these conversations as well and giving you more advice. Maybe you could even get in touch with someone there and build something amazing. Like, always try to be in a community, even if like just one group of people where you feel like you belong here and where you can grow with the other artists, essentially. So
I would also, I was to say, I'd also add humbled confidence is a good thing to have, because I'll just give a really, really brief recap of how I got into the industry. I, like Adnan said, I got rejected. I went through lots and lots of rejections, and I look back and see what my portfolio looked like back then, and I can't help but laugh. It was just terrible. And even my portfolio at the time that I got my first job, I look back and go, that was awful. I wouldn't have hired myself. But one company, my first company, I did an art test for them, and they basically told me they passed. And I was pretty distraught with that, because I think the closest that I ever got to really being able to land my first gig. And so at that point, I was starting to look at schools, because I was actually, I think, just 18 or 19 when I got rejected. I had just graduated high school. And so I was looking at some art schools, and I happened to see that company was still looking for a position to fill that position. And so I emailed them and showed them some of my newest stuff. And I said, I think you've made a mistake. I think that I'd be a great fit. And the reply I got from them was, here's your flight itinerary for the interview. And that shocked me. And so that confidence there, I think, kind of helped push them, say, hey, this guy's confident. I think he's gonna be somebody that can grow.
Yeah, he knows.
But I also think it's just as important to be humble and to never forget that you always have something to learn, and there's always somebody that's going to know things that you don't. And that's one of the things that I truly love about working for Quixel, is that by far that some of the most talented artists I've ever worked with are at this studio, and they're the most humble and always willing to help somebody out and give advice, critique, help somebody learn new techniques. And that is such an amazing thing. And I think that really helps also with marketability, to see that you can be confident in your work and you can believe that you're going to grow as an artist, but when you're humble about it and not egotistical, then that's the kind of person that people tend to like to work with.
Yeah, that was a really nice story, by the way. A bunch of people really liked it in the comments. So I'm just gonna pull up the front page over here. It's loading. Let's give it a sec. Right, so for those of you who want to know more, in general about the feature set, you can just scroll through here and you have like a final render of the rock that you can see here. And this is like originally it was a rock from Iceland. This is what it looks like if you give it like a desert margin or sandstone kind of look. And this is if you want to go fully stylized. So, really great power there in changing the look of the assets. I'd like to give a huge thank you and shout out to all of our community beta testers. Like without these guys, this thing would have never happened. They've helped us so much with beta testing. So I guess Juan Paulo Maldones, Marian Lateca, God, I'm bad with names, Peter Leban as well, Eric Dinoware. Like Eric, if you're here, you're a god. Thank you so much for all the help. That was fantastic. And Mouton Burger, and there was also Chris Widowson, Chris Evans, and quite a bunch of other people that I hope I didn't forget. But you can go to community or learning actually. Wait, which one was it? Blog. There you go. No. You can go to blog and go to this one. So this is the release article. And we've posted all of their artwork. You can see all the different features, by the way, here. So I'm just gonna post this right here. And everything is documented about this build here. And here you have everyone. So let's see, did I forget someone? No, I think that was it. Really fantastic art all over the place. So I'm gonna be closing.
Super inspirational.
I'm gonna be closing the live stream with this fantastic art. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Sorry for the technical issues early on. May the dark albedo force be with everyone. Shubaka is saying hi, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks.